All right. I've spent a lot of time talking about Jerry Coyne and Richard Dawkins and all those anti-trans atheists who no longer talk about God, but spend all of their social media time talking about how trans people are the worst. And the reason I bring this up, Jerry Coyne just wrote an essay that appeared in the Wall Street Journal about all this. Here it is, Wall Street Journal, Losing My Non-Religion. He didn't lose it. It's the Wall Street Journal's title. But look at this. I resigned from the Freedom from Religion Foundation when it turned into a gender fundamentalist organization. All of these people are like, you guys, I'm being silenced for my views. Oh, tell us about how silenced you are. Sure, I'll publish it in one of the most circulated newspapers in the world. Anyway, what did Jerry Coyne have to say? What was he talking about? He is talking about an incident that happened a couple of months ago, and I've talked about it on this. Basically, Jerry Coyne wrote an article for the Freedom from Religion Foundation in response to a different article where Jerry Coyne basically argued sex is binary, and then he lied about trans women, and he pushed for discrimination against trans people. And he wrote this article. At no point in his essay did Jerry Coyne talk about the countless ways trans people are under attack, largely by people making similar arguments. By the way, if you missed last week tonight, John Oliver and his writing staff did a wonderful takedown of all the horrible anti-trans arguments this past week. You should check that out. But what happened is Jerry Coyne published that article on FFRF's website for some reason. FFRF got so much backlash, they took down the article. They posted their own statement saying, you guys, we're LGBTQ positive. We are allies. Sorry, we made a mistake. And in response to that, Jerry Coyne's like, well, then I'm quitting your advisory board, your honorary advisory board. And then because they're all on the same email chain, Richard Dawkins is like, no, I'm Spartacus. I'm quitting the advisory board. And then Steven Pinker's like, wait, don't leave me out. I quit too. I also hate trans people. So that's what happened. I've rehashed that many, many times over. So what's he writing in the Wall Street Journal now? Well, he tells you about everything that I just told you about, and then he gives the Wall Street Journal's conservative readers the red meat they really want. Here it is. In many ways, transgender ideology is no different from the religious dogma the FFRF was founded to oppose. And now he's trying to compare trans talking points, or basically justification for why trans people should have rights and exist, to religious fundamentalism. It insists that on doctrines that are palpably untrue, trans women are women. Engages in circular reasoning, a woman is whoever she says she is, and affirms mind-body dualism. Your self-concept is more real than your actual sex. It also makes anathema of heresy and blasphemy by tarring dissenters as transphobes, attempts to silence critics who raise valid counter-arguments, seeks to proselytize children in schools, and excommunicates critics. J.K. Rowling is the best known example. I don't know, man. I feel like she's still selling a lot of books. She's not silenced. Like religious fundamentalists, proponents of these views have a fierce conviction that they're morally correct and know what's best for you in society. To disagree is to be immoral, sinful, you might say. So you see, everyone, trans rights advocates are just like religious fundamentalists. That's his argument for the conservative audience. And it all reads like someone who's still never had a single conversation with a trans person, but still pretends to be an expert anyway because he got a degree in biology decades and decades ago. Like, I'm not really interested in trying to explain biology to a biologist because he is a biologist, and that's great, but he is not an expert on this subject. But I am intrigued of his claims of being silenced for telling the truth, because the one thing he doesn't mention in this essay, and I looked for it, and it's really the only thing I really cared to look for, is he purposely did not mention the blatant lies that he spread in his FFRF piece, which is kind of the reason everyone got so mad about it. Okay, because let me show you what he wrote for FFRF, because this is the part that I think was the biggest issue. Check this out. This is what he wrote in FFRF article, which, by the way, is still accessible online, even though he says they took it down, but you can still read it online. Look at what I highlighted. This is from Jerry Coyne's essay. Transgender women, for example, should not compete athletically against biological women. That's a complete sentence right there. Trans women should not compete in athletics, not just at professional levels, but at the high school level, middle school level. They can't play sports. They can't do it. It's unfair. Again, John Oliver did a great takedown on this last week. Go watch that. What else does Jerry Coyne say? Trans women should not serve as rape counselors and workers in battered women's shelters. They can't. What if they're qualified? What if they have a degree doing exactly that? Jerry Coyne says, nope, if you're trans, you're not allowed to have that job. It's just blatant discrimination against trans people because he doesn't care about their qualifications. He just says, sorry, that's a job that's off limits to you because too bad. And he also says, if convicted of a crime, trans women should not be placed in a women's prison. Again, that ignores the well-documented perils of putting trans women in male prisons, not to mention the mental health impact it has on them, but the very, very realistic possibility of sexual violence against them. So again, in the FFRF essay, Jerry Coyne was not just spreading lies about trans people, but actively pushing for discrimination against them, not interested in their well-being, and ignoring the scientific data that shows why his assumptions are wrong and why his ideas are bad. All right. Similar arguments have been used now by the Trump administration to kick trans people out of the military, deny a trans member of Congress access to the proper bathroom in the Capitol. And it's made it nearly impossible for trans people to even use their passports at this point, because the Trump administration is going to make it so that their passport, their birth certificate, and their passport gender identity have to match up, or else you might get punished for it. So Jerry Coyne lied. It's the same lie that transphobes have been using for years. It just fuels the right-wing assault on trans people, right? None of that bothers him. He doesn't care about trans people. He thinks guys like him are the real victims. Even saying in the article, this is kind of amazing. I want to make sure you see this. Let me go back to that Wall Street Journal article. This may be the most amazing thing, and I mean that in the worst way. Check this out. This is from the Wall Street Journal article. Let's get through the boring sentence first. Existentialism has contributed the idea of self-definition, and postmodernism, the notion that there is no objective truth, only struggle over power. Yeah. Critical theory puts forth the view of a hierarchy of victimhood in which trans people hold a position near the top. Yeah, trans people are so lucky. They get to be they're not just victims, they're more victim than you are. This idea that there's some sort of competition over who has it worse and trans people win and they're going to hold it over you. Like, dude, they just want to live. Let them live. You are not the victim here. Oh, let me go back to, I just want to point out, do you see in that last sentence, the critical, right here, do you see that the word trans, Jerry Coyne put that in quotation marks? Like, why? This is just more proof that he doesn't care about these people. He's like, they don't really exist. I'll call them trans, but that's not a real thing. That's how he operates at this point, right? Throughout the piece, actually, if you look throughout that Wall Street Journal piece, unless he's quoting someone else directly, he doesn't actually say trans. He refers to transgender ideology. He refers to transgenderism, like it's a mental illness or something. And the only time he uses the word trans without quotation marks is when he pits trans rights against what he calls scientific reality. And then at the very end of the Wall Street Journal piece, this is what he says. The FFRF has not only abandoned science, but suppressed discussion and argument about its decision. Because you guys, the existence of trans people, Jerry Coyne believes, is up for debate. Civil rights and human rights are something that, like, you can have a debate about. Unbelievable. Given the organization's embrace of quasi-religious and unscientific dogma, I am proud to proclaim myself a heretic. Like, fine, man. No one wants you there anyway. It's fine. But this idea that FFRF is anti-science because they said, look, we published a stupid article, shouldn't have done it, and we want to make sure our LGBTQ members, and even if you're not members, know that we have your back. They're apparently the worst people in human history. Like, if only we could all be so lucky as to be silenced and suppressed so that our whiny, dumb rants appear in a national newspaper. Like, I know I said this before, but no one owes him a platform, including FFRF. And someone who claims to care about the facts and critical thinking, maybe he should spend some time thinking about why he's so easily duped by right-wing propagandists anytime the topic involves trans people. Like, he seems to think, you know who's the expert on trans people? J.K. Rowling. Not trans people themselves. What do they know? They're not biologists, even if they are PhDs in this stuff. No. The lady who wrote the children's books knows more about trans people than anybody else. He calls himself a heretic because calling himself stubborn and ignorant, I guess, is something he didn't want to do. But this is what happens when you basically spend your retirement in a right-wing echo chamber filled with fellow academics who think the real problem in society is never the most powerful people on the right, but the most annoying people on the left. And in case you're wondering, like, oh yeah, that's Jerry Coyne. He wrote that, but at least Richard Dawkins and Steven Pinker didn't say that. Well, those guys definitely shared the article. FFRF is an admirable foundation led by good friends. Alas, like most secular humanist atheist orgs, except for the Center for Inquiry, which bears my name, they were hijacked by a silly, juvenile cult. I think he's talking about trans people and, or, I don't know, decent human beings? That's the cult, apparently. Fortunately, the silly cult's days are numbered, by which I can only assume he means, church-state separation is done now. Who cares? I'm done with trans people. I have an accent, therefore you must believe everything I say. That's Dawkins' position on this. What did Steven Pinker say about all this? He shared the article as well and said the Freedom from Religion Foundation is among many nonprofits that have sadly surrendered their mission and their minds to hard left and woke ideology. By which he just means, oh, these people care about civil rights and like American history. Sorry, you're too woke. Anyway, look at my hair as I walk over to the Trump administration and tell them they're amazing. Like, these guys, what? I don't know what the hell is wrong with these people, but I don't know. It's just sad, this weird rabbit hole they've gone down. Instead of weighing evidence, and like, there's plenty of it to debunk. Coyne and his buddies are just doing exactly what they're complaining about when it comes to fundamentalism. They came to a conclusion while ignoring the facts, and now they're refusing to budge because capitulation of any kind would be too much for them. That's the sort of thing back in the day that these guys used to say is wrong with religion. And here they are joining the fundamentalist crowd in their own way. All right. What other questions, comments we have there? This is just dogmatic refusal to accept that trans people like me exist. Yeah. I mean, that is what it is. Your existence to people like Coyne comes with a giant asterisk. You are not a real person in the way he sees real people. It's awful. And again, these guys are not silenced. I've followed a lot of these people on social media, and they spend all their time talking about their upcoming talks. You can buy tickets to their shows coming up now. They're doing just fine. There's always an audience for like either right-wing grifters or people who latch on to right-wing grifters like them. Because again, none of these people are like active Trump supporters. but they know that their base is now full of Trump supporters or people adjacent to that. Coyne is another biologist who should absolutely know better regarding sex being binary, which, by the way, that is something a lot of other PhDs and experts in genetics and biology have tried to tell him. But again, he knows better than them because, I don't know, he's a man, because he's cis, because he's just older than you. I don't know. He doesn't have a good reason, but he doesn't seem to care what other people who also have expertise in the subject say about all this. He would rather defer to like the children's book writer who's really rich. Sounds to me like a more accurate title would be, I quit that job so I could be an asshole with the persecution complex. I mean, he didn't even quit a job. He said FFRF had an honorary board of advisors. Do you know who's on that board of advisors? No, you don't, because none of you know who's on that board of advisors without looking it up, because it's just a nice little thing they did way back in the day, and then no one cares. Honestly, I love the American Humanist Association. Every year they give out awards. One of them is like their Humanist of the Year award. And even people who are following this movement and a part of it, none of you know who recent Humanists of the Year are. That's not a knock on the American Humanist Association. We could do this with every single group. But the point is, it's a nice title to bestow upon someone, but I'm not expecting anyone to know what it is. And Jerry Coyne's like, I quit this prestigious position that surely all of you care about. Like, dude, no one knew you were on it. That's like, yes, I'm quitting this thing that none of you ever knew about, and I'm using that. That's my platform. Sorry, that sounded better in my head. It clearly came out wrong. What other questions you got? I would love to hear of his valid counter arguments. Sorry, the Wall Street Journal didn't give him much space to talk about his supposed valid counter arguments. Just whining. They gave him space for that. Why is the trans issue an issue? It has absolutely no bearing on anyone. Let people live their goddamn lives. I agree. I know, because it's an easy boogeyman. It really, I'm not trying to compare the two groups, but like, it really is an easy thing for right wingers to latch onto, because for most people, the issue is clouded in ignorance. And this is very much what they did with marriage equality, because there was a long period of time where people are like, what? Two men together and they want to get married maybe, or they want to have children? This doesn't make sense in my head. And then young people grew up and they're like, yeah, all right, that's just a thing that happens. It's fine. And then they moved on. And that's what will happen to this issue too. Eventually people will move on. But while the ignorance persists, Republicans are going to use it to their advantage, and they're going to make pronouns a punchline. And this will happen until they're over it, and then they move on to whatever. People of color, let's go pick on them again. That's always an easy target.